The Chazon Ish in Yoredeya Kuf Chavhei 125 teaches us that there were 4 periods of time that Hashem dictated the Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu. The first period of time was at Har Sinai. At Mount Sinai, Hashem dictated to Moshe Rabbeinu the entire Torah, up to and including Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, including the Aseret Adibros, the 10 statements. The second period of time that Hashem dictated word for word the Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu was in the Ohel Moed in Vayikra. He dictated all of the end of Shmos and all of Vayikra in the Ohel Moed, in the tent of meeting, describing the avoda of the Leviim and the avoda of the Mishkan. The third time that Hashem gave a period of time of dictating the Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu was in the Midbar, in the desert. And throughout the desert, all the events that happened in the desert, Hashem dictated to Moshe Rabbeinu as they were happening, as they just happened, and dictated the Torah to him in the Midbar, in the desert. The fourth time was a unique dictation. It was Hashem speaking mitoch gurono shel Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem was speaking through the throat, through the mouth of Moshe Rabbeinu. During the last 37 days of his life, Moshe Rabbeinu dictated his last will and testament, his last charge and challenge to the Jewish people to keep the Torah when they came to Eretz Yisrael. He dictated it to them in Arvos, Moab, in the plains of Moab, just north of the Dead Sea, in the plains of Moab, where is Jordan, on the other side of the Jordan River, opposite Jericho, opposite Jericho. The last 37 days of his life, from the first day of Shvat, Rosh Chodesh Shvat, until the 7th day of Adar. When he died on the 7th day of Adar, he was born on the 7th of Adar, and he died on the 7th day of Adar at the age of 120, with his full faculties, his full strength, was not aged, and with full vigor. And he gave over the last charge and the last challenge to the Jewish people to keep the Torah when they went into Eretz Yisrael. And Hashem spoke through the mouth of Moshe Rabbeinu. How Hashem spoke through his mouth, through his throat, through the vehicle of Moshe Rabbeinu. Whatever Moshe Rabbeinu said as his last charge became Torah, and that was through the mouth, through the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We see, therefore, that the Torah is God speaking to us. We do not look in the Torah for us to speak to Hashem. The Torah is Hashem dictating himself to us. Ana nafshi kasvis yahavis, says the Gemara. Hashem placed himself in the Torah. He put his mind, so to speak, his will in the Torah, and he gave us himself. He gave us his will, his mind. He dictated himself into the Torah and gave himself to us. We speak to Hashem through prayer. So it's a two-way relationship. It's a give and take, two-way relationship. Hashem speaks to us, the Torah. We speak to Hashem through tefillah. So through Torah, we can discover Hashem's will for us. Hashem is speaking about us, describing our struggles and how we can attain closeness and dveikus to Hashem. It is not about man seeking God. It is about God seeking man. God seeks us to be a recipient, a vessel, a kli to receive his will. If we look at a picture of the Mishkan, and I'm going to show you a picture of the Mishkan. The Mishkan is Hashem's description of us. The Mishkan, the deeper meaning of the Mishkan is a symbolic man, a symbolic Adam. Here is a picture of the Mishkan, the Beis HaMikdash. This picture of the Beis HaMikdash itself. And if you look closely, you can see that here is the Holy of Holies. And the Malbim says the Holy of Holies is the mind of man. Here is the Kodesh. This is called the Kodesh HaKodshim, the Holy of Holies, which was partitioned off with a curtain where the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, went in only once a year on Yom Kippur. The second section is called the Kodesh. That's where the menorah and the shulchan were. that represents man's torso, because the menorah represents his heart, and the shulchan, the table, represents his stomach. Spirituality and materialism, ruchnius and gashmius. So that's the mind of God, and the mind of Hashem was put in the Torah, and He gave it to us, and that's what represents our mind, our seichel, our intellect, our das. Here in the second section, in the Kodesh, which is partitioned off from the Holy of Holies, in here there is the menorah and the shulchan representing man's torso, and here in the Azara is the mizbeach, the altar, which is the limbs of man. Mind, torso, limbs of man. The Malbim says this is a picture of Adam, proving the two winged cherubim. This is a picture of the Aron Kodesh, the Holy Ark, and it's a gold box with a wooden box inside, and then another gold box inside with a cover, and the two kruvim, the two angels, a boy face and a girl face, with the wings extended toward each other with a space in between the wings. Inside here was the broken luchos and the actual luchos, the broken Aseres Adibros, the broken 10 Commandments, and the whole 10 Commandments. Seichel, this is the mind. This was in the Holy of Holies. In the second area of the Kodesh, we have the menorah, which represents the spirituality, the heart of man, the light of man, the ruchnius of man. And we also have the shulchan. The shulchan is the table, the 12 breads, 12 layers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, upon which there was a piece of bread, a matzah-like bread, which was representing the 12 tribes, and they remained fresh from Friday until Friday. And these 12 breads represent the Gashmius. So in the middle, the Kodesh was the Gashmius, the stomach, the physical dimension, and the menorah, the spiritual dimension of man. The spiritual dimension. Those are the two parts of the torso, the chest area of man. And here, the limbs of man, this was outside that area, mind, torso, and then outside the area, there was the Mizbeach, where the offerings, and the Kohanim walked up this ramp, and there was a fire here, a very large area, and the offerings, the korbanos, were made over here. In actual fact, the Meforshim tell us that when the Balabas placed his hands on the head of the korban, it's symbolic of himself being offered to Hashem. A korban, a sacrifice, means that we ourselves are sacrificing ourselves to Hashem. We are giving ourselves to Hashem. Hashem gave himself to us. He gives himself to us through the Torah. He gives us his mind, his will. And we connect with Hashem by offering him our thoughts, our free will. He gives us free will, and we take the free will and we offer it back to Hashem by following his mitzvos. That is called dvekus. Dvekus, connection. Mitzvah means tzavsa, connection with God. The word mitzvah means tzavta in the Zohar, connection with God. Chet means disconnection, disconnect, missing the mark. Mitzvah means to connect. And when we want to have dvekus, when we are batel, mevatel, we are sublimating our will to Hashem. We sublimate our will to Hashem, become batel to Hashem by doing the mitzvos. Batel does not mean we are nothing. Batel does not mean we are worthless. Batel means we take our will, our free will, and we give it to Hashem. We sublimate it to Hashem. So batel, to be batel, means not to be nothing, not to be obliterated, not to be worthless, but to take your will that Hashem gave you and give it back to Hashem. So Rav Malevsky, one of my Rebbeim, said, Zatzar Rav Uzziah Malevsky, former chief rabbi of Uruguay, said that Hashem gives us our free will in order to give our free will back to Hashem. He gives us our free will. The greatest gift Hashem could give us is Tselem Elokim, which is free will. And our job was to take the free will and give it back to Hashem. That's tzavsa, that's dvekus, that's batel. We are batel to Hashem when we do His will, when we do the mitzvahs. So if the Torah is God's will, God's mind giving to us, what is He saying to us about this Mishkan, which represents the human being? The human being, the Mishkan, says the Malbim, represents the mind of man. That's the Holy of Holies. The torso of man, the menorah, the light, the spirituality, and the shulchan, which is my stomach. So we have two parts of man in the torso. That's the Kodesh. And my limbs, my Evarim, are the Korbanos. And therefore the whole man is represented. Adam, we are represented by the Mishkan and our offerings in the Mishkan to offer ourselves to Hashem. Hashem comes into the world through Mishkan. Mishkan, He's Shochein. He dwells. Shechina, that's called divine providence. He dwells with us through Mishkan. And we relate to Him through Mikdash. It's the same thing. It's the same vehicle. It's called Mishkan Ikri Mikdash. The Mishkan is called Mikdash, and the Mikdash Ikri Mishkan, says the Gemara. That the Mishkan is called the Mikdash, and the Mikdash is also called the Mishkan. It's the same vehicle. Just from Hashem's direction, it's called Mishkan. He wants to be Shochein. Matova Olecha Yaakov Mishkin Nosecha. How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, Yisrael. Mishkan Nosecha means Hashem is Shochein. He dwells within us. Not in a building, but in us, Mishkan. And Mikdash, we take that will and we elevate ourselves to His will. That's called Kedusha, sanctity. So in the Parsha of Vayakhel, if you look at Shmos, chapter 38, Pasuk 9 to 13, what is Hashem telling us about this Mishkan, which relates to ourselves as we travel through the desert of our lives? The Torah tells us in Shmos, chapter 38, verse 9 to 13. Vayaz ha'chatzer, and He made the court for the south side, southward. The hangings of the court were of fine twined linen, 100 cubits. And for the north side, 100 cubits. Their pillars 20, and their sockets 20 of brass. The hooks of the pillars and their fillets of silver. And for the west side were hangings of 50 cubits, their pillars 10, their sockets 10, the hooks of the pillars and their fillets of silver. And the east side, eastward, 50 cubits. Rashi explains the word kedma as follows. On the eastern side, kedma means the eastern side. Lifa'at kedma mizracha. So kedma mizracha. Kedma, kodem, forward, mizracha. The eastern side, says Rashi, is called kedem, a word meaning the face or the front. And achor signifies the back. Therefore, east is called kedem, which is the face, and the west is called achor, as it is said, the back. Ha-acharon, hayam ha-acharon, the sea, which, says Rashi, is translated in Aramaic as Yama Ma'arava, the western sea. So the west is behind me, achor, behind. Kedem, the east, is toward me. Now we are facing, here in Baltimore, we are in America, we are facing Israel, Jerusalem, the Beis HaMikdash, we are facing Mizracha, eastward. So is Kedem, toward, frontward, means toward the east, toward the Mizrach. So the four directions, says Rashi, are based on a person looking toward the east. The four directions described in the Mishkan, in the Torah, in Vayakhel, are described as a person looking toward the east. And then his back is to the west, his right is to the south, his left is to the north. Says Rashi, the east is called forward because the face leads one forward, kedem, forward. The west is called achor, back, because the back faces westward. The Maral explains the deeper meaning of these four directions that Hashem is describing in the Mishkan, since we are the Seichel, we are the Holy of Holies. The Seichel represents the Holy of Holies, that our Holy of Holies is our Seichel, our godly intellect, and our torso. our kodesh, is our spirituality and our physicality, and we have to combine the two of them. We have to take our heart and our body together and work together to serve Hashem. And the mizbeach of the person is his limbs, his arms and his legs. And the Maharal explains that we are the Mishkan, and there are 4 directions in which we can go. Says the Maharal, what is Mizrach? The power to create yesh me'ayin, something from nothing, is called Mizrach. Because the east is where the sun rises, connoting the idea of the will to bring something from nothingness into reality. It's dark at nighttime. East, the sun rises as if, ki'ilu. Of course, the sun never sets because we are turning away from the sun. The sun is always there. The sun is shining somewhere in the world. It's the world which is turning away. But in our terms, for us, the sun sets. It doesn't really set. It's light everywhere at all times. And if you go onto the NASA website, you can see that the space station circles the Earth every 90 minutes. And it shows how the world goes round and how the space station goes around the world. And the sun comes up, the sun goes down, the sun comes up, the sun goes down. You can speed it up and see how it goes around the world. It's an amazing thing to see. So it's as if when night ends and dawn comes, it's as if something comes from nothing. There's darkness, which represents nothing, and the sun rises, and it's yesh me'ayin, something, the light arises from nowhere, from nothing. And that happens in the east. So the east, kedem, represents yesh me'ayin, the beginning of something new. This power, says the Maharal, is called chesed. To give life to something which lacks life, the power to renew something is called mizrach, kedem. Mizrach means to give something light, give something life, which did not have it, had darkness before, and now it has life, light. Mizrach comes from the word zricha. Mizrach comes from zricha, which means to shine. As the Pasuk says in Tehillim, Mimizrach shemesh ad mivo'o, from the rising of the sun unto its going down. So the movement forward, when we, human beings, move forward, we move eastward, Mizracha, it contains within us the desire and the will to achieve a goal. So Hashem is describing these directions, east, west, north, and south, because he's telling us that we are the Mishkan and we can go in any direction we choose. He is telling us the guidelines. The meaning of Mizrach is yesh me'ayin, chesed. Go toward the goal of chesed. Always march eastward. Look toward the east. Look toward the Beis Hamikdash. And the Mishkan, in this case, is talking about the Mizrach, Mizracha, Kedem, go forward and become like God, a Meitiv. Go forward with Chesed, go forward with Zricha, go forward with creating something from nothing for other people. It's called a person who is emulating Hashem, becoming a giver like Hashem. As the Ramchal explains in Derech Hashem, God's purpose in creation was to bestow his good on another. His wisdom, therefore, decreed that the nature of this true benefaction be his giving created beings the opportunity to attach themselves to God to the greatest degree possible for them. So this is Hashem's purpose in creating the world, to give finite human beings, ourselves, finite human beings, the opportunity to connect with the infinite. So when Hashem is telling us and describing us the directions, north, south, east, west of the Mishkan, he's saying to us that the Mishkan represents in the different directions, Mizrach. So when Hashem is describing the Mizrach, Kedem, he's saying to us, go in the direction of being a giver. Go to the direction of a person from Yesh Me'ayin, Zricha, to create something from nothing for other people by giving them life, by giving them light. That is the direction that God is giving his will to us and telling us how to go, which direction to go in. What is the west, Ma'arav? The opposite of chesed is din. Din comes from the word die, enough. And we're going to sing at Pesach time. You heard a shir just now from Rabbi Heinemann about Hilchos Pesach. And next week we're going to speak about Pesach and prepare our minds for Pesach. We're going to sing die, dayenu, die, dayenu. Die means enough. The word dayenu comes from the word, is the source of the word din. Die, shakai, shin, and a dalet and a yud. Enough. Hashem has said to the world, enough. Expanding and enough. Here is the gvul, here's the boundary. Shakai means to limit, to direct yourself. So the word din, opposite of chesed, din comes from behind. Chesed is forward, din comes from behind. That's die enough, which stems from the back, which says of Pasuk in Eov, says the following: Behold, I go forward, but he is not there, and backward, because I cannot perceive him. So the word achor, backward, is the root of the word acharis, end. What is the meaning of the word backward, achor? What is God telling us to do when he describes the west behind us as achor? It means to restrain ourselves, to show self-control. Die, enough. Shakai, hold yourself back. Self-control. It is necessary for chesed, which goes forward, to sometimes restrain itself. Because to sustain chesed, to sustain kindness, too much kindness would overpower the world. For example, the flow of the sea, the flow of the ocean is called chesed. Without water, the world cannot survive. Therefore, water is called chesed. But if water flows over the shore, over the boundaries, a tsunami, God forbid, a flood, too much chesed, life cannot be sustained. It overflows human life and will flood the world. As it says in Parshas chapter 1, verse 9, Vayomer Elokim, Yikavu hamayim mitachas hashamayim el makom echad, vateireh hayabasha vayichem. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together in one place to restrain themselves. The water covered the whole world. Choshech al pnei sehom, the flowing of the deep. Let the waters be gathered into one place, makom echad, and let dry land appear. And it was so. Parshas chapter 1, verse 9. Therefore, gathering of waters is called din, is called restraint, is called self-control, is called gevura. Chesed is going forward. Din, retract, self-control. Die, enough. And it says in Eov, and prescribed it for my decree, and set bars and doors, and said, thus far shall you come, but no further. And here shall your proud waves be stayed. Eov chapter 38, Pasuk 10 and 11. Hashem describes how he created the world, and he said to the waves, enough, gvul, border, boundary, limits. We have to give chesed to our children, and we also have to prescribe limits. And the rule of thumb is 80% chesed and 20% limits. Many of us give 80% limits and 20% chesed. But our job with our children is 80% chesed and 20% limits. Say yes most of the time with some boundaries. Love, but some direction and guidance. Love with some firmness. Giving with some discipline to maintain that balance between chesed and restraint, self-control, manners, dignity, self-restraint. So this midah of self-restraint, of achor behind us, the west, is called west because it is the place of the setting of the sun. The sun rises in the east, that's something new. That's yesh me'ayin. The setting of the sun is enough. God says to the day, enough. You've shone on the world for a whole day. Now it's enough. 12 hours, 10 hours, 14 hours. It's now enough. Set. Restrain yourself. So kindness expressed through the shining of the sun is chesed. But it becomes limited and bounded at the end of the day. The direction of the south, the direction of the west is also called Yam, the sea, because the sea also forms a boundary for the land. So the land forms a boundary for the sea, and the sea forms a boundary for the land. Yam is westward. To bring the world from nothing into reality. Yesh me'ayin. The 10 plagues emanated from God's attribute of Gevura and were meant to negate Paro's attempt to block the creation of Klal Yisrael. The Yetzias Mitzrayim was a reenactment of the creation of the world. God created the world as Reshis, and Klal Yisrael is called Reshis. We're called the beginning. And therefore, the creation of Klal Yisrael in Mitzrayim was a reenactment of the creation of the world. The purpose of Klal Yisrael's creation was to bring notice to the world, to bring awareness to the world that there is a creator. So Hashem created Klal Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, something from nothing, just like He created the world, something from nothing, for us to be able to teach the world that there is a God who created something from nothing. That's our mission. That's our task. That's why we came out of Egypt, to represent something from nothing, to represent chesed, to represent God's chesed, to represent the idea that there is a creator who created the world, who created values and midos, and we have to follow them. That's our job. Pharaoh wanted to stop that. So Hashem brought 10 plagues through Gevura. He restrained him through Gevura to allow the creation, the recreation of Klal Yisrael, the creation of the world and the recreation of Klal Yisrael, the reenactment of the creation to take place. The chesed of creation and the chesed of creating Klal Yisrael had to be created by the withholding, the restraining of Pharaoh through Gevura. Chesed occurs through Gevura. Therefore, let's be aware that Gevura, restraint, is not an anti-force. It's not a force in and of itself. God created Gevura. God created restraint. God created self-control in order to give effect to allow chesed to take place. Therefore, chesed and Gevura work together. So sometimes we have to work with chesed, sometimes with self-control, sometimes with complete unconditional love with our children, and sometimes with conditional love, sometimes with praise and sometimes with correction. But most of the time, it's with chesed. Most we're going mizracha. Most we're going kedem. Most we're going to give, to praise, to validate. Sometimes we have to guide. We have to contain. We have to restrain. We have to give them direction. Emulate these directions. These directions have meaning for us personally because we are the Mishkan. We are the seichel, the spirituality, the physicality, and the limbs. And we are in that Mishkan. We are the Mishkan, and we are moving in directions. Which direction? We have to move toward chesed. We have to use chesed by restraint sometimes. They work together. What is darom? Darom, south. Darom is made up of two words, says my Rebbe, Rav Moshe Shapiro Zatzal. He says darom comes from the word dar rom, who dwells on high. Dar, dira, to dwell. Rom, on high. Romamu, on high. It is the south, darom, where the sun hits its highest point at noon. It illuminates, it warms, it sustains the world. Therefore, darom, south, represents continuity. To keep the world going, continuity. Man's right side represents that which influences and sustains. The right side represents strength to continue the values of chesed. So we go chesed, forward. We have restraint, self-control, but we have to sustain it. We have to maintain it. We have to continue it. We have to have strength. The gevura of the sun, the highest point, we have to keep it going. That requires ongoing sustainability, consistency. That's the idea of darom. Darom, strength on high, and strength in our right hand, strength to continue this pathway of chesed. Safon, north, is where the sun is hidden. The word safon is safun. That's why the afikoman is called safun, hidden, because we hide the afikoman. That's called safun. The north is called safon. Safon means hidden. Safon is north, where the sun is hidden. As the Gemara says, it goes to the south by day and turns again toward the north by night. Bava Basra 25b. So the midah of the left hand, the midah of the north, the hidden, which is the left hand, which is weaker, it's the hidden hand, so to speak, represents the idea that the right hand achieves, the left hand retains. As the Gemara says, Tehei small doiche v'yamin mekareves. So when we want to deal with our children, we want to bring them close with our strong hand. And when we do restraint, when we do discipline, we want to use the weaker hand, the softer hand. But the right side and the forward side is stronger. We have to move toward the direction of strength, of giving, of chesed, and we have to restrain it somewhat with the back and the left side, because we have to move forward with the right side, move forward with strength, move forward with mizracha, with kedem, with continuity, and move forward toward chesed. And in order to achieve that chesed, we sometimes have to restrain ourselves, and we have to repulse or say no, but with the left hand. The right hand brings close with strength. The left hand says no, but softly. It's the weaker hand. Therefore, we have to learn, as we relate to our children, that we have to give forward with love and positivity, and most of the time give love and positivity and praise and validation. And sometimes with the left hand, we have to discipline and we have to give direction. But it has to be from the weaker side, from the die enough, from the left side, boundaries. But most of our lives have to be toward chesed, toward giving, toward creating something from nothing to create chesed. How can we apply this to our lives today? What is the message for ourselves in terms of the personal growth, in our personal growth chabura, how we can be inspired and grow from this message? All four directions, east, west, south, and north, are found in the creation of the Mishkan, the sanctuary, and all are necessary to bring the Shekhinah, God's presence, His divine providence into the world. The way in which Hashem dwells in the Mishkan is an example for us to emulate, as we are the Mishkan. We are that symbol of the Mishkan, the sanctuary, the Kodesh HaKodshim, the mind, the torso, the heart, and the materialism, the limbs. Our being is a Mishkan, and therefore our will has to be primarily to bring good, to bring kindness, to bring chesed, to bring giving to the world. We have to become a giving person through acts of chesed. We must also sometimes make a boundary. Sometimes we have to make an achor, a western side and a northern side, to hold ourselves back sometimes, because too much chesed, too much giving, and we lose everything. Too much giving and I lose myself. Too much chesed and I don't have any time for my own family. I have to have a balance. I have to do chesed, but I also have time for myself, time for my own family. One of the deeper reasons for this is we don't want our chesed to be so great and so largesse and so overpowering and overwhelming that the person who receives our chesed becomes dependent on our chesed. We don't want to give so much, the person becomes dependent on that chesed. So we can give, we want to give, we want to build, we want to create something from nothing. We want to take someone who has had a dark life and give them light and give them chizuk and give them strength and give them an opportunity to continue that strength. But they have to do it on their own. They have to take steps to do it on their own. That's why sometimes you have to hold back a little bit and say, go ahead and walk. Go ahead and do it. I'm here to support you, but keep going. Therefore, the chesed has to be paramount, but not too much that the person should become dependent. The recipient of our chesed should receive the chesed and kindness, but learn to become independent and not dependent.